Hello and welcome to Sandra's Knitting Beginner's Lesson. Today we're going to demonstrate a couple of basic knitting techniques. I will show you how to cable cast on, do the knit stitch, the purl stitch and the cast off. So you will need a pair of needles, knitting needles. I'm using wooden or bamboo knitting needles, suitable for beginners. I would highly recommend them. And some chunky soft cedar yarn. Now to start with, I will show you how to begin with the cable cast on by doing a slip knot. For a slip knot, I'm holding the front short tail towards me, wind over and across like that. The working yarn, I'm going to lift the first loop behind and pick up the working loop, holding on to my tail. Once I've done that, I'm going to insert my wooden needle and tighten my loop within to about a centimeter away from my wooden needle. Now to start with, this is a right-handed tutorial. I'm going to hold the needle and the loop in my left hand, and I'm going to use the other needle to insert in a down placed onto one of the needles, and I'm holding it in my left hand. I'm going to insert my working needle or working yarn and my working in my right hand in a downward away from me motion. The working yarn, I'm going to yarn over like that, gather the stitch through that loop that's on the needle and place it back onto my left hand needle. My second stitch, I'm going to go behind the whole stitch, not through the stitch. I'm going to go behind the loop that's on my left hand needle, yarn over, gather the stitch or loop and place it back onto my left hand needle. Now I have 3 loops on my left hand. I will continue in this fashion until I have the required number of cast on stitches your pattern requires. I'll demonstrate a couple more times. So it's in 2 behind the whole stitch, yarn over, create the loop and place it back on to my left hand needle. I will now demonstrate the next plain knit stitch. To do that, I'm going to hold my working needle in my right hand and ensure the yarn is at the back of my work. That's how I hold my yarn. I'm going to insert into the front loop of my stitch. I'm going to yarn over, create my loop and retain it onto my right hand needle while dropping the stitch off my left. I'll do it again. Insert, yarn over, gather and release. Downward away from me, the yarn at the back, yarn over, gather and release. Into the stitch, yarn over, gather the stitch and release.
You're doing it too far.
Yarn over, into the stitch, yarn over, create the stitch and release. Into the stitch, create, yarn over, create a loop and release. And that is what you get as a knit stitch. I will demonstrate again on the other side. So we swap the hands and move the right hand needle back into our left hand and continue with the knit stitch. So to ensure that the yarn is in the back position for this stitch, into the stitch, downward motion away from me, yarn at the back, yarn over, create a stitch and release. This is my next stitch. In the front loop, downward motion away from me, yarn at the back, yarn over, create the loop and release. Again, downward motion, yarn over, create a loop and release. Downward motion, create a loop, through the same loop, bring it through. And this is called the knit or the plain stitch. I'll repeat this one more time so that you have clear instructions on how to begin. Into the stitch in a downward motion, away from you, the yarn at the back, round the working needle, create my loop and release. I should have one loop on my right hand needle, Into the stitch, create a loop and release. Into the stitch, yarn over and release. Into the stitch, yarn over, gather the stitch and release. Downward motion, yarn over, gather the stitch and release. Into the stitch, yarn over, gather the stitch and release. And thank you for listening to my tutorial on how to knit. Hello and welcome. I'm going to show you how to start the purl stitch. To begin with, the position of the yarn is of great importance. The position of the yarn is in front of my work, and this is how I start. My right hand, the working needle, in the opposite upward motion above the left hand needle. The working yarn in front in an anti-clockwise motion around the working needle, push it through at the back, create my loop onto my right hand needle and release the stitch on the left hand. The yarn in front at all times for this stitch. Again, the position of the needle is in the opposite direction over the left hand needle, yarn over, anti-clockwise, push through and create my loop, my purl. I've got 2 purl stitches on my right hand needle. Again, direction of the yarn in front of my work, anti-clockwise, create a loop and release. Yarn over and do my loop. Again, this is the purl stitch. The yarn position always in front. Insert my right hand needle over the left hand needle, yarn over anti-clockwise, create a loop onto my right hand and release. These are my purl stitches, all transferring from the left hand onto my right hand needle. Again, opposite direction to the knit stitch, yarn over, push through, create a loop and release. In the opposite direction, yarn in front, yarn over, and purl the stitches on my left hand, and I'll keep demonstrating for you to follow. And this is how we purl. P-U-R-L for purl stitch. Thank you for watching. I will now demonstrate how to cast off. To cast off, we always need 2 stitches on our working needle. So to begin with, I'm going to cast off knitwise. Knit the first 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Now using the tip of my left hand needle, I'm going to pick up the first knitted stitch on my right hand and drag it over and off my right hand needle. I will be left with always 1 loop on my working needle. I knit the next stitch. I will have 2 stitches on my right hand. I'll use the tip of my left hand needle to pick it up and drag over the right hand needle, leaving me with my 1 stitch or loop on my right hand working needle. So keep knitting and keep casting off when you have 2 stitches in this manner, and this gives you a beautiful braided plait on the top. As you will observe, a beautiful clean finish. So to cast off, 2 stitches on your right hand needle, pick up the first, drag it over and off this work. Same motion, keep going, pick up and cast off. This method is also referred to as a knitting bind off or a knitting cast off. And I'll finish my few stitches and show you how easy and how neat this bind off or cast off is. Casting off is very, very simple once you have mastered this bind off method. And there we are. That's how we cast off. Thank you, and we'll catch you again for my future. Keep an eye out for future tutorials in how to knit with Sandra. Thank you.